You ever get into one of those arguments about what football really is? I mean, depending on who you're talking to, that one little word could mean a round ball, an oval ball, kicking, carrying, or even, believe it or not, kicking someone in the shins on purpose. So let's untangle this whole thing and dig into the wild family history of one of the world's favorite games.
It seems like it should be a simple question, right? But the answer? It's anything but. See, the word itself is this huge global puzzle, mainly because football isn't just one game. Nope, it's a whole family of sports with a shared and, let me tell you, a very messy ancestry. So what are we even talking about when we say football?
Well, for about 250 million people across the globe, this is football, the beautiful game. Now, in some places, like the US and Canada, you probably call it soccer, but its official name is association football. But as you're about to see, this is just one piece of the puzzle.
Then, there's this. In the United States, this is football. Period. A game of helmets, pads, and complex strategy that, let's be honest, looks completely different from what we just saw. Same name, totally different universe. How on earth did that happen?
And it gets even weirder, in the best way possible. If you head down under, this is what they call footy, a super high-flying, crazy fast-paced game played on a massive oval field with 4 goalposts at each end. This is Australian rules football, another very proud, very distinct member of the family.
And of course, we can't forget rugby, which has its own family drama, splitting into 2 big codes, union and league. It's a game of just non-stop action and unbelievable toughness. Here's the thing, though. All of these sports are football. They're all branches on the same family tree. And to understand how they're all related, we need to go way, way back to their roots.
Long before there were any stadiums or rule books, people all over the planet were kicking things around for fun. These ancient games were the wild, totally chaotic ancestors of the sports we watch on TV today.
You had games like Cuju in ancient China and Harpastum in the Roman Empire. They were everywhere. But the most direct ancestor to our modern games was something called mob football in medieval England. And you gotta picture this, entire villages going to war to move an inflated pig's bladder to the other town's church. There were basically no rules, and you could have hundreds of players. It was pure, glorious chaos.
So, how did we get from what was basically a citywide brawl to the organized sports we have today? Well, the whole transformation really happened in one very specific and maybe surprising place, the elite private schools of 19th century England.
Right, so in the 1800s, these English public schools started to actually write down rules for their games. And why? Pretty simple, really. They wanted to play against other schools without it turning into a mob football riot. But this created a brand new problem. Every single school had its own set of rules.
And this is where the big conflict really starts. The schools basically fell into 2 main camps. On one side, you had schools like Eton, who loved a game based on skill, kicking and dribbling with your feet. On the other side, you had schools, most famously the rugby school, that developed a game where you could just pick up the ball and run with it. This one difference, kicking versus carrying, was about to lead to a massive showdown.
Okay, so it all came to a head in 1863. A bunch of guys from different clubs met up in a London tavern. The goal? Create one single set of rules for everybody to play football. But instead of uniting the game, they ended up splitting it. Forever. Now check out these 2 proposed rules. Rule IX says you can run with the ball. Okay, sounds good. But then Rule X says that if you run with the ball, the other team is allowed to hack you. And hacking was not tackling. No, it meant you could deliberately and forcefully kick your opponent in the shins. This was the one issue that just blew everything up.
This quote from F.M. Campbell of the Blackheath Club, man, it says it all. For the clubs that followed the rugby school tradition, hacking was a core part of the game. It was a test of courage, of toughness. For everyone else, it was just brutal violence that had no place in a game of skill. The 2 sides just couldn't agree.
So what happened? A vote was held, and both running with the ball and hacking were banned from the official rules. In protest, Blackheath and the other clubs that were all about the carrying game literally stood up and walked out of the meeting. And that moment, right there, was the great split. It was the birth of 2 separate sports, association football and what would become rugby football.
But that split didn't end the story, not by a long shot. It was really just the beginning. That walkout in a London pub triggered a massive explosion of innovation. All around the world, different places started to formalize their own unique versions of football.
And you can see on this timeline just how fast it all happened. Just a few years before the London split, rules for Australian football were already being drawn up in Melbourne. A few years after, the first American college game was played. Then rugby got its own official rulebook, and over in Ireland, the GAA was founded to write down the rules for Gaelic football. Each branch of the family tree was now shooting off in its own direction.
And all of that brings us to today. The result of that 19th century explosion is this amazing, diverse, global family of sports that all share this one common, tangled heritage.
So the official term for this big family is football codes. And it's the perfect way to describe it, right? They all trace their DNA back to those meetings in England trying to tame the chaos of mob football, but then each one evolved to reflect the culture and the people that fell in love with it.
This chart really puts the different paths of these family members into perspective. I mean, look at that. Association football, the original kicking game, has a staggering 250 million players around the world. It is by far the most popular sport on the planet. And then you have American football, which is absolutely dominant in its own country, but has a much, much smaller global footprint.
So from these chaotic mob brawls to mass and global spectacles, the story of football is just one of constant change and evolution. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? With new hybrid sports popping up all the time, what does the future hold? What new game, born from these old traditions, is going to be the next branch to sprout on the incredible family tree of football?